Let me start by saying it's a real honor to be here, and I really appreciate that you took the time to come and listen, even though some of your professors required it. I'm just going to take it as you wanted to be here. I want to tell you my story, and a lot of it's going to be business, but I want to give you kind of the beginning. I was born in 1970, so forever ago, and the first day of kindergarten, I was afraid to go. And my mom asked the school principal to stop by the bus stop to encourage me to go. That was followed by me getting a few more D minuses than F pluses all the way through 10th grade. I was a complete failure as a student. In 11th grade, I decided to try. I was really, really good at failing, which takes some effort. So I decided to try and succeed. I had totally changed my mind. Junior and senior year, I was on the A or B honor roll every trimester. My high school had trimesters. And I was able to get accepted to Franciscan University. It's actually the only school I applied to. I was accepted. I came. I wanted to teach kids that dealt with a learning disability like I did. I had great empathy for students. I'd been where they had been. My brain thinks differently. A lot of teachers told me I was dumb and stupid and incapable. I currently spell at a 4th grade level. Daily, when I type emails, and you get that little red squiggly line that says you spelled the word wrong, and then you right-click it, and the computer goes, "No idea." I have to pick a different word. So there are struggles and challenges for me, but here's what I did after. I graduated in 9 semesters. Show of hands, the 3.0 students and higher, if you're willing. Oh, look at that. So if you didn't raise your hand, you've got a great shot at being an entrepreneur. I was a 2.4 graduate. I had just an amazing experience here. And so, first of all, congratulations that you're here. This is an amazing place. And when you're a kid, you put that tooth under your pillow, and money is there the next morning. And when you're a Franciscan student, the friars sneak into your room at night, rip your heart out, melt it down into the shape of a San Damiano cross, and they sneak it back in before you graduate. It's an amazing transition you go through being here. So I'm glad that you're here. I taught for 6 years. Met my wife. She also taught. She taught kids with physical disabilities. And when it was time to have our children, I wanted to make a little more money. I grew up relatively poor. My dad was a truck driver, and there were a lot of times where we struggled for money. There were times when there wasn't enough food in the house. And so I didn't come from a lot of cash, and I wanted to live life differently. I wanted to not limit my kids. If there was something, I wanted to be able to provide that opportunity for them. So I got into sales, and I sold office supplies and cleaning supplies for 3 years. That business went out of business, and as it was going out of business, I discovered Jimmy John's. I got into Jimmy John's. I needed my brother-in-law to get involved. He needed $50,000 of cash. And when my wife and I got married, we each had our own home. And I rented mine out for a few years, and I sold it at the top of the market. I was really lucky with the timing, but I made $35,000 selling a house I bought for $40,000. And instantly, I'm thinking truck and a boat. It'd be awesome, right? Well, my wife said, "You don't have a job." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah." I'll totally be able to use the boat. She was like, No, you're not getting it. You got to work. And I said, "All right, there's this Jimmy John's place. I'd like to give it a try." And she said, "No problem. So long as you don't fail, I'm good with it." Well, that really struck a chord because I told you I failed a lot and I was really good at it. I didn't have that many years of success in my history, 2.4 college student. So I threw myself at it, and I really, really went into it. And I named my company Spin the Planet. It's a unique name. It's different. People say I like that when I give them my email address, dan@spintheplanet.com. Now you have my email address. It's really simple, and if you need to email me at any time, I'm happy to take your emails. I want to help if there's anything I can do to help. But I named it that because the first time, it's interesting being in this room. The first time I was on campus, this was a roller rink, and I was skating on my visit the year before I started school here. But my senior year, between my senior year and my extra semester, I worked for the convention staff, and I met a guy named Brian. And Brian was a workout guy. And Brian worked out 3, 4, 5 hours a day. A little excessive, right? But Brian met me, and he goes, "Hey, man, we're working out. You need to be more buff." And I said, "I'll work out with you." And after 3 hours, I'd quit. It's just too much of a workout. But Brian called me as I was figuring out what I was going to name my company. And Brian said, "I've been in my bedroom for 3 days. I'm in a funk. I think I lost my job." I'm like, "Probably. You've been in your bedroom for 3 days. I've never been in my bedroom more than 8 hours, but 3 days? That's excessive." So I was trying to cheer Brian up, and Brian, in my mind, it just popped in. Brian looked like that Greek god. He was always doing like a muscle pose. He's like, "Do I have gum on my shoe?" I'm like, "Geez, dude, no." But Brian looked like that Greek god Atlas with the planet, the Earth, on his shoulders. And I'm like, "You feel like that, like you're way down, you're in this funk." I'm like, "You need to get up, go do something, go spin the planet, go get out of your own head and do something for somebody else, because God's given you gifts and talents and abilities." And I said, "I don't care if you help some old lady across the street, you carry groceries for somebody, you change somebody's tire on the side of the road. Get out of your head and do something for somebody else." And I knew I was going to be doing Jimmy John's, but I had to have my own business name. And I want to spin the planet doing business as Jimmy John's. And at Spin the Planet, I knew I was going to be hiring a lot of part-time, a lot of minimum wage, a lot of first-time employees. And you may have worked one of these jobs, and on your paycheck, it didn't say Jimmy John's or Subway or wherever you got your first job. It said the name of the corporation that was doing business as, if it was a franchise. And I didn't want it to be Dan Band Sammy's doing business as Jimmy John's, because then you're working for the man, right? I don't want to be the man. I want to be the dude. I want to be that guy that is supporting and helping. And I've worked minimum wage jobs. I washed dishes at Perkins for 6 months when I was 16. I wanted to hear what people had to say, and I wanted to say to these people, what you're doing is meaningful. Just about everybody I know knows how to make a sandwich. It's not complicated. It's not rocket science. Is it spinning the planet? It can be, depending on how you go about it. Everybody wins in my organization. The customers win. They're excited to not bake bread for 3 hours, slice up tomatoes, lettuce, and put a sandwich together. They can come into one of my shops, and in 30 seconds, they're walking back out with a sandwich. And they're happy to exchange the $8 or $10 if they get a combo, and now they're eating, and they've fed themselves, and they can go on and use their gifts and talents and abilities to do what they do really well. Our entry-level frontline workers, a lot of them part-time, want a part-time gig because they're in high school, they're in college, they're going to be the next best video gamer that makes 6 figures. They're going to do something with their life other than Jimmy John's, and they want this flexible schedule on which to do it. So they win. My assistant managers are starting a career learning how to run a business. My general managers are running $1 million business. And every 28 days, I meet with all of the general managers in a room like this, and we go over their profit and loss statement. And we go over what's coming up in business, and we go over any issues they have. And then at the end, I pass out bonus checks for 25% of the net income of the store that they run. So they're partners with me. Most of them have never taken a college class. I've never asked for a high school diploma. And so it's this organization where everybody wins. It's not about being the owner and having 35 stores. It sounds like, wow, that's incredible. I have a lot of staff. I have a lot of employees. I actually have a guy who works for me. He's been with me all 20 years. And he's done everything in the organization. Started as a sandwich maker and a delivery driver and then a shift supervisor, an assistant manager, general manager, an area manager, managing many stores. Today, his title is Love, Hugs, and Smiles Guy. That's his title. Love, Hugs, and Smiles. So what he does is he goes out every day to the employees we have that are awesome and excellent and working their butts off. And he might bring them a new pair of shoes or a new jacket when it gets cold. He might take, hey, give me the keys to your car. And he goes and gets them an oil change, washes it, cleans the carpet, takes care of the car, fills it up with gas, brings it back. Or he might go in and say, hey, where are you at today? It's 1 o'clock. How much do you need to slice? How much bread do you need to bake? You got any catering coming up? Who's on the schedule? Okay, great. Get out of here. Go take a nap. Go to Target. Go watch a matinee. I'll cover the rest of your shift. There's just, it has blown my mind to be in business and know, here's how I can impact people's lives. It was a Friday night several years ago. And I got home and my wife and I quickly fed the kids, headed off to my oldest son's lacrosse game. We got there 20 minutes early like we were supposed to so they could warm up and practice. And as we were getting out of the car, I got a phone call. And as I'm getting this phone call, I look at my wife and I say, hey, I'll be in before the game starts. I'm getting a call. She's like, great, no problem. I turn away from my 2 boys and my 7-year-old daughter, and I answer the phone. I said, hello, this is Dan. And on the other end of the call is Heather. And Heather is a single mom, a store general manager, she has a 7-year-old daughter, just like me. And Heather's on the phone and she's crying and she's gasping for breath. She's sobbing. And finally, she's able to tell me, my daughter Alex just had a stroke. I'm at the hospital. I'm afraid, and I'm not going to be able to come into work tomorrow. Now, our company has a policy like every other company that says if you don't work, you don't get paid. Our company does not have a policy for when an employee's child has a stroke. So now I have to respond. She's waiting to hear from me. What am I to say? And I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, but I couldn't do that. I didn't know. I've never heard of a 7-year-old having a stroke. I wanted to tell her I understood, but clearly I didn't understand. My 7-year-old just went skipping into the lacrosse game. So here's what I did. I found my Calmness Voice, and I knew I needed to remove stress and roadblocks. And so I said, Heather, I'm so sorry to hear this. I will find someone to manage your store for you. And I will keep paying you. You will not miss a paycheck. I need you to take care of Alex. Call me in a week and let me know what's going to, give me an update in a week. And Brenda and I are going to pray for you and pray for Alex. And I hung up. And Heather was out of work for over a month. And then she came back part-time. Today, Alex is 16, and she's not only making sandwiches in one of our stores, she's learning how to manage. And Heather isn't just running one store, she's running 6 as an area manager. My wife and I have been able to do that a number of times. We've had employees have cancer, need heart surgery. Maybe they just needed a tooth replaced. But when you are the man, or the dude, you understand. And I was here at Franciscan, and I pronounce it differently now. And when I was here, I learned how to pronounce things a little bit differently sometimes than I do in Minnesota. So what I learned is that there's some people from Ohio Valley that say Yins. Yins want to go to the calf. But they're different than the people that say Ewans want to go to the calf. And I sometimes pronounce Franciscan as Francis can. I will tell you, having heard what I've said so far of failing and not working and not being successful in school, to deciding to I can do this, I can do this, I can open a business. Not only can I open a business, I can be extremely generous. I can take care of not only the people that work for me. I have a policy. A lot of my employees don't understand the difference between cussing and cursing. It's different. One uses a deity's name in vain, and one is just your 4-letter swear word. So I teach that, and I don't allow anyone to use anyone's deity in vain. I've never heard anyone say anything negative about Muhammad or Buddha. It's always our God, right, that they're ripping on. But I don't allow it. I allow some of those other words. I mean, they could say the S word, Subway. And we deliver to Subway quite a bit. It's just hilarious. My general managers will snap a picture of the receipt, and they're like, "We're taking another delivery to Subway." It has been an incredible journey to go from the village idiot and my parents wondering, is this guy going to live on the street, to this success that I'm at right now. And so I want to encourage you that at Franciscan sometimes we can feel like poverty, and that vow that the friars are taking is something that we might need to adapt in our own life. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but there's a relationship with money that can be extremely healthy. My wife and I, with our success, have been able to donate to our church in a very meaningful way. My wife and I were asked to help with a church in Uganda. And I asked what the budget was, and I was told, and I said, I'll cover it. We built a church in Uganda, covered it ourselves. We give to a lot of different organizations. And if you look at Francis himself, Francis came from a very wealthy family. Because he came from a wealthy family, he understood finance, and finance is a language. And if you don't understand the language of finance, you'll probably struggle with your finances. So I encourage you to really pay attention and understand finance. And then when you've understood finance, figure out what you need and what you want to live on. Figure out what you can give away. Because Francis built 3 churches. I don't think he paid for them himself. I went to Greece this summer on a pilgrimage to St. Paul, and I found out that St. Paul did a few pilgrimages, or did a few tours of Greece. And on one of his tours, he walked everywhere. Greece is really hilly, by the way. At least as hilly as Steubenville. But on some of his tours, he got to ride a mule. Why? Financing. People financed him and his mission trips to evangelize. So this world needs finance people and people who are successful and people who make money. And I will tell you that I don't think earning a living and earning extra cash to give away and being Franciscan are mutually exclusive. In fact, I think they rely on each other. I think they're mutually dependent. So Doug, I'm like 25 minutes in. I know I didn't cover all the stories that you might want me to cover, so is there...
I do have a question for you.
Okay.
Could you talk a little bit about how you got started, and then secondly, some of your failures and how you bounced back from the failures?
So starting out, I mentioned Jimmy John had a requirement of $50,000 of liquid cash available. And I sold a house because I moved in, my wife's house wasn't in the hood. literally. So I had 35 grand, and you needed 50,000. So her brother never spent a penny, he didn't have to. And so we brought her brother in at 50%, and he put in 25 grand, and we put in 25 grand, and then we went and got an SBA loan. So in Minneapolis, there was a business library and people that could help me put together a business plan. I've had one class session of business course, like was here a couple years ago, and I just sat in on somebody's class. So I'm not a business major. Doug mentioned I'm an education major, taught kids with learning disabilities. You don't need to be. I wish I had taken some business classes because there's a number of failures. So I got started with one store, an SBA loan, and then went back to the SBA, got a second loan, and then another one. There is a Jimmy of Jimmy John's, and so I'd see Jimmy every 6 months. And the first time I saw him, it was a month before opening my first store. And I went up to him and I introduced myself and I said, I got a store opening next month in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and I'm going to open 30 stores. And he'd say, great, write me a check. Jimmy, I can't afford to write you a check. I was a school teacher. He's like, well, you're bugging me then. So I go back home, I open the store, I see him again in January, and I said, hey, Jimmy, I got one store open, I'm working on the second one. I'm going to open 30 stores. And again, he says, write me a check. I said, Jimmy, I can't afford to write you a check. He goes, you're still bugging me. So I went back to St. Paul, I opened a second store. I saw him again in July. Now I've got 2 stores open, and I said, I'm working on my third store, I'm going to open 30 stores. And he says again, write me a check. I said, Jimmy, I can't afford to write you a check. I got 3 SBA loans, I can barely pay the bills, I'm working 20 hours a day, but I know I'm going to build 30 stores. And he goes, you're bugging me. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm just telling you where I'm going. I'm telling you what I'm doing. Then in October, he called me and he said, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean? He said, what are you doing? I didn't realize this, but my name had come up. I had built 3 stores in 14 months, and he had people who had signed a franchise agreement who still hadn't built a store, and they signed up before I did. So he knew I was doing what I said I was going to do, and he said, I've got some guys who have some money. They'd like to invest in Jimmy John's, but I don't trust them to bake bread. And I said, well, let me talk to them. And they came up and we created a partnership, and for 5 years, I worked with those guys. And for 5 years, instead of me going to the SBA and doing this much paperwork to get a loan to build a store, they just wired 100% of what I needed into my account the next day. Every time I sent them an email, I needed $400,000 to build a Jimmy John's in this suburb. Next day, boom, wired into my account. I'm not lying. True, I fell off my chair the first time it happened too. I was in shock. If you have a direction, even if you don't know how you're going to do it, go. And if you're called to do something, go. And if God calls you a different direction, He calls you a different direction. But if He doesn't call you a different direction and you're really listening and you're praying and you're paying attention, He may just pour rocket fuel on what you're doing and how you're doing it. And some failures. My very first store, I was looking at my budget, and I was looking at what I had borrowed, and I was looking at how am I going to get this thing open. And when it came time to going over the lease for the store location, I decided to avoid the $3,000 expense of a lawyer to read the lease. I'm like, $3,000, that's a lot of Jimmy John's sandwiches. A lot. Because, we make like 20 cents on a sandwich. So I'm like, I'm going to skip that. What I didn't know, because I was new, and what I didn't know because I hadn't taken a business class, and what I didn't know because I had never signed a lease like this before, was that in this lease, there was a clause that said, we think this is such a great location that you might be partly successful because of us. It's a percentage rent clause. And so there's a natural break point. So I would pay rent up to X amount, but I had to report sales. So as I reported sales, they said, yeah, you owe us the rent you thought you were going to pay. But then my sales increased because why? Because I'm working my butt off. And sales increase, and all of a sudden they're sending me an extra invoice. So I had a 5-year lease, and at 2.5 years I hit that natural break point, and now I had to pay more rent. And over those 2.5 years, I paid an extra $80,000 in rent than if I had had a $3,000 attorney look at my lease and say, you don't want to sign this part right here, that should be amended. From 2001 until 2015, every store I opened in Minneapolis and St. Paul was successful. They all made money. Some not a lot, some a lot, covered for the ones that didn't make a lot, but they were all successful. But in 2014, 2015, the Minneapolis-St. Paul market was full of Jimmy John's. There wasn't room for another one. So I decided I would go into a new market, and I went to Boston, and I got to buy the whole market. This time, when Jimmy said, hey, write me a check, I could do it. And I borrowed the money from the bank, but the bank was willing to give it to me because they saw my track record. So I went to Boston, and it was $2 million for the franchise fees for 75 stores. And I thought, I'm going to do the same thing I did in the Twin Cities. I've got these people that are buying new cars, that are buying houses, and their families always lived in an apartment. The people that are calling me out, come look at my new car, check out the air conditioning. They're so excited. And I'm making a difference. And I can't tell you how many couples we have that work for me that met at Jimmy John's, and now they're married and buying houses and having kids, and it's really cool to see. But I'm going to do the same thing in Boston. Well, I get to Boston, and Boston is a home of Dunkin' Donuts. It's a franchise, just like Jimmy John's. But in Boston, Dunkin' is from Boston, so they'll love Dunkin' in Boston. Jimmy John's is not from Boston. They didn't like it. They didn't want to support it. Boston's a cool town. And I opened a store around the corner from this place called Mulligan's Sandwich Shop. And I went in one day because Jimmy John's wasn't open. I want to check out the competition. I've already made the commitment. I'm already building the store. I walk in, and it's this tiny little store, room enough for 3 or 4, maybe 5 customers to stand and wait while your sandwich is made. And I ordered a turkey sandwich, a roast turkey sandwich. And this guy went over to this oven and opened it up, and it was a Thanksgiving turkey. They made a Thanksgiving turkey every day, and when it was gone, they didn't sell turkey sandwiches anymore. But it was the best turkey sandwich I had ever had in my life. And it was the same price. I'm thinking, and it was 4 times as much meat. I was like, how are we going to make it? We didn't. I opened 9 stores in Boston. 2 of them are still open. I closed 5 of them. It cost me $1 million to close those 5 stores, to do the debranding and buy out of the leases that I had committed to, $1 million. Again, I didn't have that. I had to borrow that and then pay it off slowly. But failure isn't necessarily a bad thing, and it's not a reason to not get into business. If you actually think you're not going to fail, you shouldn't get into business. You're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes. Actually, when we opened our very first store, I had been out of work for a few months, and my mother-in-law was starting to ask questions. Like, what kind of loser did you marry? She didn't actually say that in front of me, but I'm pretty sure that was what she was thinking. So, and this was my wife's idea, so I don't get credit for this one. My wife takes her mom to a Jimmy John's for lunch. Not ours, because ours wasn't open yet. And we had just had our first child, and he was 2 months old. And she said, Mom, Dan found a job in Florida. And Grandma starts crying. And then she says, it's going to be okay. I was kidding. We're not moving to Florida. We're just opening one of these shops that we're in. And Grandma's like, yay, good job! We knew, and we didn't tell her until it was too late. Like, we'd signed the franchise agreement, we'd signed the lease, we signed the bank. I was going to training in Champaign. There was no turning back. We were really confident that if we had told her before we had signed anything, she'd probably talk us out of it. I'm not suggesting you do that. But maybe, if that's what's going to work in your family, do that. Because there will be people that will say it's too risky. There will be people that will talk you out of it. And when people come to me and they say, hey, I'm thinking about getting into Jimmy John's, my response is, do you want me to talk you into it or out of it? Because I could do either. It's hard. It's way harder than it looks. But I don't mind working hard. And if you don't mind working hard, I would highly encourage you to open your own business. I like being the decision maker. I like having a love, hugs, and smiles guy. I like my team. I like helping them out. I love when life is the worst for them, that I can be the support that they need. Because a lot of companies just won't do that. And they can't do that. Or they've got a policy that won't allow them to do it. I get to write the policies. That's cool. Other questions? Yes?
I kind of have a two-part question. One, what drew you to Jimmy John's to want to run that as a franchise?
Okay.
And then second, what made you think of having the position of the Hugs and Love guy to implement?
Okay. So the first one, I did do a little research on other options. Every 5-year-old I know can make a sandwich. And Jimmy John's they had one location in the Twin Cities when I got started. Now there are 90. I own 35 of them, but there are 90 in town. Subway, I would have had to move to some tiny little town somewhere to open a Subway, because at that time Subway was everywhere already, and now they're still everywhere. Although they've closed over 1,000 stores each of the last 3 years in a row. Jimmy owned his own stores. Subway, when I started, owned 3 of their own stores. Now they own 0. And I think, how can you test? How can you put out to the franchisee, this is going to work when you don't own any of your own stores? I think it's crazy. The biggest factor was I could afford a Jimmy John's and I couldn't afford anything else. The second question, the Love, Hugs, and Smiles guy, he's also the guy that inspired our sabbatical. So I had this kid at 18 who started working at my first store. And he showed up for work on his skateboard. He had actually moved to town from about an hour and a half away, and he came to the Twin Cities to figure out what he was going to do with his life. He was 18, and he'd ride into work on his skateboard. And he had, he just had this incredible energy, and it fit with Spin the Planet. And after 4 or 5 weeks, I was like, I want to make this guy a manager. So I tell my wife, I'm like, I got this kid, he's 18. I think he should be a manager. And she was like, you've been working too much, you're crazy. I said, just come in. And they hadn't seen her because she's home with my 3-4-month-old kid most of the time, and she was still working part-time. So she came into the store when Paul was working, and she ordered a sandwich. She sat down, and she's got my kid in the baby carrier. He's right over here, by the way. And he's big now. He's 20, just like our company's 20. And she sat him on the table, and she's having her sandwich. And within minutes, she identified him, and she's like, yeah, that kid should be a manager. And so he's been with me since before I opened my second store. And what I started to realize is that putting your key in the door of a Jimmy John's every morning and stretching and baking bread and shredding lettuce and cutting tomatoes and slicing the meat and cheese and putting in about 5 hours of prep work before a customer even walks in and working on your own for 3 or 4 of those hours can get in your head of just, I'm a robot, this is monotonous, I'm doing all this food prep that really should be done by a robot, and I'm in my head too much because I'm all by myself working. And so I started to see turnover, and I thought, there's got to be something I can do to take care of these employees, because I tell my guys, I'm like, you're not shredding lettuce and stretching bread and baking bread all day as a robot. You're operating a $1 million a year business. You're buying $300,000 worth of food. You're paying people $300,000. There's $100,000 going to Jimmy John's in the advertising fund. You are managing a lot. And so they're running a business, and depending on how they run it, it makes money or it doesn't make money, or it ends up having a really decent bonus or it doesn't. And we compare the stores. Hey, these 2 stores did the same in sales. They didn't have the same food and labor costs, and so the profit is significantly different. So this guy's walking home with $500 today, and this one's getting $1,500 because of how they ran the store. But that Love, Hugs, and Smiles guy, Jimmy inspired that a little bit. He was doing something similar, And I was like, that sounds like a great idea. And I just implemented it. And I don't need that position. It's not required in my franchise agreement. And I could take the money that I'm paying him and give it to myself, but that doesn't move the needle for me. Yes?
Can you go into specifically what your pre having that guy turnover rate was and to post having him? What the turnover rate was to just see like.
You're such a good student.
If you're sharing that.
Oh my goodness, are you a great student? We have a saying that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. But I have no idea how to answer that question. Because there are limits. And in business, I could spend all of the profits of my business and then some hiring people to analyze my business and have those exact stats and really know those numbers. But that's not always wise either. And so there are excellent metrics that we measure. And honestly, when I have a discussion with the president of the company and we talk every year about what positions we're going to have and keep and what people are going to be paid and so on and so forth, he is in my luxury category. It's an absolute business luxury to have a love, hugs, and smiles guy go out and take care of the team. But it's kind of a luxury like an oil change in your car. And at some point your car will have the oil change light come on, and you can keep driving the car. But at some point, the engine's going to seize up. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. And I think the gap on that is really hard to measure because there's so many other factors as to why people come and go and why they leave. And COVID threw a whole wrench in everything. And but I love the question. I know you're an A student just because of that question. Right here.
Is it still profitable to try to enter in as a franchisee?
Is it still profitable to enter in as a franchisee?
I mean, given the larger success that Jimmy Johnson's had in recent years. Like if I were to enter the market tomorrow,
Right.
am I guaranteed to grow and make profit?
No. If you enter business, there are zero guarantees. None. It's worse than that. There are competitors that are trying to stop you from succeeding. They want your business. They're fighting for those customers and those dollars. But I will tell you, the guy who works the hardest almost always wins. And so when we started off, I mean, it was, my employees literally asked me, like, hey, did you tattoo that black shirt on your body? Because I was always in uniform and I was always at the store, or I was marketing, or I was going to pick up food, or I was taking a delivery, or running to Office Max for something we needed. You can be successful today. If you get into Jimmy John's, absolutely. If you find the right market, you find the right location, you have my email address, I will help you. If you want to get in, if you want to choose a different concept, I will still help you. I will lead and direct you. I won't have all the answers. But yes, you can absolutely still be extremely successful and grow something, but it can't be about you. And this isn't about me. And when it becomes about me, it's problematic. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Oh yeah, do you have the one in Robertson, PA? No.
Sorry, man.
It's doing good up there.
But I could call the guy. Is there a reason you need a?
It's just fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I have a further question for you. Can you speak into how you implement the Catholic faith element when you're at work? Like, are you able to directly kind of push that into your faith or to the work element when there are so many restrictions on faith in the workplace?
Absolutely. So when you start a business, the federal government wants to give you an EIN number. It's like your social security number. But that's tied to the type of business you're going to be doing. So Hooters Restaurants is able to always have women working as the waitresses and have no male waitstaff because they're actually designated an entertainment company. So they registered like a strip club. They didn't register as a restaurant. And that's how they got around having male waiters, because that wasn't their thing. I'm registered as a restaurant, and so I've got to act like a restaurant legally in how I perform what I do. So I can make rules like no using any deity's name in vain. It might push it if I said you just can't use the Christian deity's name in vain. That might be a line where somebody's like, hey, wait a minute. My wife and I, my cell phone, my picture of me, my cell phone number, my email address is in the back of every single store. That's a witness, I think, to say, I care, and we want you to be successful. The story gets out when Heather's getting paid to take care of her daughter who has a stroke. So I can't put a crucifix probably in the back of the store without potentially getting a lawsuit. But I can take care of my people based on my Franciscan foundation and my Catholic faith. And then I advertise in the Catholic high schools, and I support when they have a basketball tournament. And I'm like, hey, all the umps, all the referees get free box lunches. And so there are things we can do and things we can't. We have had a number of employees pull my wife and I aside different times and go, hey, can we talk about God? And that's really amazing. And we had a guy, we have an employee who I don't think can read past the second grade level. And he spells worse than I do when he sends an email response to customers. And he pulled my wife aside and he goes, hey, you know what? I used to be Catholic. Are you Catholic? And she had to be careful, but she was able to say, yes, absolutely. Why are you asking? Have you got a question? And he said, I'm thinking about going back to church. And she was able to just encourage that and believe in him. And so we do have to be a bit careful, especially with anything we put in writing. But it's evident in how you walk, and it's evident in how you care, and it's evident in how you approach situations and problems and things that come up, because stuff comes up all the time. There's always drama. And we always do our best to approach that answer, with heaven in mind. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of your work-life balance?
Every once in a while, my hip will vibrate like my phone's vibrating, but it's not really vibrating. I've probably done some nerve damage or something. I've explained it this way. At the beginning, I worked so much. And it's almost as if, if you imagine, what does it take to get a rocket off the Earth and into orbit? And then what does it take once it's in orbit? And so at the beginning of my business, it was an immense amount of work because I was the only guy. But as it grew, I was able to hire someone to help. And so now I have a CFO, and he actually has time to help when we build a new store or we remodel a store. I used to have to do all of that. He also can help with the leases. So I've got help. So my work-life balance is a lot better. But something is really important for you to know. When you're the business owner, you set your own schedule. So yes, I work Saturday morning and Saturday night, but if my kid had a soccer game or a lacrosse game at noon on Saturday, I could go. Or if my kid was at Stone Soup play in second grade at 1 in the afternoon, I could go. And every time my wife said, there's a really important moment in our child's life, can you be there? I was able to say, yes. At least after, 2 or 3 stores, where I had enough employees to move around and make it happen. And that is an amazing thing to be able to say. And so If you haven't read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I would suggest you read that. If you haven't read Dreams into Action by Milton Castells, I would read that. How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Sales, I would read that. And these are all easy reads because I'm not that smart. But how much you invest in yourself can really amaze your parents. My parents are amazed. Yes?
Do you consider yourself to be self-made?
Yeah, is that a bad thing? I mean, I bought a business in a box. I got a paint by number. I mean, are you an artist if you do a paint by number art, right? Does that make you an artist? Maybe not, but there's so much besides the Jimmy. Like, I don't get to change the uniform. I don't get to change that it's Hellman's mayonnaise. I don't get to change where we buy the Jimmy John cups and sandwich wrap. There's a lot I don't get to change. And so I got to buy something, business in a box. If I do what Jimmy did, I should probably be successful. But there are Jimmy John franchisees who are jerks and don't take care of their team and are milking it for every penny. And they are the man, and it's not good. But with God's help and tremendous support from my wife, I took the baby steps every day. And every day I made progress. And every day I took baby steps on this path of following my calling. And I thought it was teaching. And I was an okay teacher, not a great teacher. I was a very empathetic teacher because I had a learning disability. But I'm a really good business guy. Am I the best? No. Are there guys greater than me? Probably not in the Jimmy John's world. But in the world, much larger business guys handle much bigger deals. I'm in a business organization. I'm the little guy in the room. I meet with 9 guys for 4 hours once a month. 2 of the guys are running businesses that do $4 to $6 billion a year. And I get to sit in the room and learn and educate myself. I still push myself. I still want to get better. I still want to get stronger. When I was your age and I thought if somebody was 51, I was like, that guy's so close to the grave, man. This is what 51 looks like. I don't feel 51. I don't think I look 51. Yes, I color my hair, and it helps. But when I look in the mirror, I don't see a 51-year-old. And that's exciting. And I get up, and I go, and I run, and I make life happen, and I impact the lives of these kids who probably will never go to college, but they're valuable, and they have gifts and talents, and they can run a business. I can teach them how to do it, and they love it. And so my self-made, everyone's self-made, and you just got to go, well, what did you make yourself? Yes?
You're the dude.
Why not? You get to choose. There's so many choices in life, and we choose where our results are. We choose them to some degree. And yes, there are struggles and there are roadblocks and there are things that will come up, and we can come up with excuses all day long. Stuff happens. Oh, this happened. Oh, this happened. Oh, everybody's got excuses. Everybody's got reasons why it didn't happen. Everybody. What are the reasons why you succeeded? What are the reasons why you made yourself who you are? And this isn't about me, self-made. It's never been about me. It's about Spin the Planet. It's never been about how big is my bank account. It's how much can I give away? How much can I help? So far this year, the managers in my stores have been given at the end of the 28 days over $500,000 in bonus money in 35 stores. And we've got 4 or 5 months to go on our financial calendar. It's awesome to take kids whose parents were like, you're not going to college? You're not going to take that step to better yourself? What are you going to turn into? And then they could become a manager at a Jimmy John's at a fast food restaurant? You loser. No. Mom, Dad, look who I hired. I hired Bill. He was 14. I asked Bill, why do you want a job here? And Bill's like, I'm saving for a paintball gun. Really? Yeah, I want a paintball gun. Great. Here's how you make a sandwich. 6 months later, Bill comes in, got a picture. Here's my paintball gun. Isn't it cool? And I'm like, I don't know. Probably. I'm sure it is. Are you going to keep working here, Bill? Yeah, I'm going to keep working. Why? I'm saving for a car. What are you going to do with the car? Well, I need a car. I'm going to have, to get back and forth so my parents don't have to drive me. And then Bill gets a car. And then Bill's like, here's my car. I'm like, that's a cool car, Bill. That's awesome. But then Bill, I'm like, are you going to keep working here? He's like, yeah. What are you saving for? He's like, I'm going to go to college. I'm like, great, Bill. Well, Bill started working at our first store when he was 14. Now he's 34. He's got a college degree. He's got a wife. He's got kids. But Bill started working for us, and we had an impact on where Bill's life is now. And my managers are doing that every day, hiring somebody new, teaching them how to tuck their shirt in, how to use a broom. I hired an 18-year-old kid. One of my managers did. I went in to see the manager. I got to talk to you. He's like, hey, this is Bob. He's been working for us for 10 minutes. I'm like, hey, Bob, I just walked by a mom and toddlers walk out and they turned 100 chips into 1,000. Can you go sweep that up? And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. And I talked to the manager, and as I'm talking to the manager, I look over at Bob sweeping, and Bob's holding the broom like this. I'm like, hold on. I go over to Bob. I'm like, have you ever used a broom before? No, sir. You're 18, you haven't used a broom before? He's like, no. I'm like, well, I know why your parents wanted you to get a job. It's more of a hockey stick hold than a baseball. It's not a baseball bat, it's a hockey stick. And we're teaching people how to sweep. It seems unbelievably simple, right? But that's what we're dealing with. And that's why they get minimum wage. They have zero skills walking in. They know their name, and that's about it. So we teach them, and that moves the world. That spins the planet. And so when you leave here, you should leave with goals way bigger than they were when you walked in here. Whatever you do, please don't limit yourself. You will, but I'm going to ask you to stretch those limits. Push the possibilities. And even if you don't get there, you'll get farther than you first anticipated you would. Don't sell yourself short, because you only get you. They don't do brain transplants, and they probably won't in your lifetime. The you got is what you got. So how do you get to heaven and be able to look God in the face and go, I tried my best and I did not waste anything. I fulfilled the potential I thought I could get to. And I want God to look at you and go, way outperformed what I expected. Wouldn't that be great if he said that? Oh, am I impressed. I thought you'd get to 10 stores, but 35? You outdid yourself, man. Come on in. Any other questions? Yes. I'll get you in a second.
What's the best thing if you want to be an entrepreneur out of college? What do you think is the best thing you can do now?
The best thing, what year are you?
Sorry, what?
What year are you? Are you
I'm a freshman.
Freshman. Listen, I'm an educator, and I strongly believe in educating yourself and getting as much experience as you possibly can, finding out what industry you think you need to be in, and understanding it and researching it, and volunteering if you need to be in that industry to figure that out. And you might get it wrong. You might start off in one thing and it should be something else. But give up TV, video games, screwing around kind of time. Doesn't mean don't go play ultimate frisbee with your group, but invest in yourself the way some people invest in the stock market, the way some athletes invest in. You don't want to overdo anything, but you're never going to stop being you. So how much of your time is you building you, whether it's your classes and your studies, and then what you do on top of that, and how much of your time is doing something for somebody else, and then how much of your time is just like, dude, I got to watch a half hour of Friends or whatever your thing is. You know what I mean? Like, how do you find that balance for you? But if you put $100 in the market 10 years ago, it'd be worth 1,000. But if you put 1,000 in, it'd be worth 10,000. So how much of you are you going to say, God, I got to take this thing to the next level? Everybody has an expectation of me. The expectation of me when I was in 6th grade was that guy's going to be the village idiot. What did I show them? Huh? So, but that was because I decided. Am I self-made? I don't know, but I decided to be as much as I possibly could be, and I'm not satisfied.